Hi, everyone. It's Kristan Hawkins, and welcome to this new episode of the Explicitly Pro-Life podcast. We are in season 3, and we're talking about having difficult conversations. So joining me today is my friend Lauren Muzyka. She is the founder and executive director of a group called Sidewalk Advocates for Life. If any of you have ever been out on a sidewalk participating in 40 Days for Life campaign, you've probably heard of Sidewalk Advocates for Life. She is a licensed attorney, but has a passion for defending human life. She's not like any other attorney you've ever met, I promise. And so she has had such incredible growth with Sidewalk Advocates since they've launched over 200 locations now worldwide, just in the past 6 years. And by according to their estimates, over 12,000 women that Sidewalk Advocates have come into contact out front, in front of the abortion facilities, have chosen life. So I can think of no one better to have this conversation with than you, Lauren. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Kristan. And I just want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's a conversation about the most important conversation in America today. And the beautiful thing is that regardless of what's going on in Washington, D.C., we can go to our local abortion facility and affect change. And you mentioned the 12,000 turnaround. So this morning we did confirm 12,000, now over 12,000 women who have turned around at abortion facilities throughout the country with the help and assistance of a sidewalk advocate. And these women have chosen life for their preborn children. So 6.5 years, God has done a lot, really amazing. So thanks for having me.
That's awesome. I mean, you think about that number. I think I like numbers. I throw around numbers all the time, but it's hard sometimes to envision what just one person, the difference and the legacy and the impact that just saving one life will have on our world. Then to think about 12,000 of those people. Right. I mean, that's like an army. Like that's, I don't know, goosebumps, got goosebumps. All right. So You went to law school. Lawyers aren't really known to be like activists. So how did you get into this movement? And then how did you find this niche of, wait a minute, we need to do something different out on these sidewalks?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's safe to say the plans I had for my life obviously didn't pan out. I thought I was going to be legal counsel for a pro-life organization, always had a passion for defending the sanctity of human life. But it started when I was a student at Texas A&M University in College Station, Texas. We, at our parish, we were invited by the local interdenominational Brazos Valley Coalition for Life. So this is a local organization, a peaceful activist organization that invited us to just go pray 1 hour a week at the local Planned Parenthood. And, hopefully women would see that and they would be moved through the power of prayer to choose life for their preborn children. And I remembered having a moment where I was like, this is the most important thing that I can be doing, aside from my studies, right, as I move towards this goal. But I looked at it like, okay, this is, if we don't get this right, we get nothing else right. This is the one right from which all other rights flow. And so I was like, yeah, I can do this. I can go out and pray for 1 hour a week. And then it was my sophomore year where they said, hey, anybody want to get trained as a sidewalk counselor? And I don't usually have a lack of words. And again, you can be an extrovert, introvert doing this, right? But I was like, okay, maybe I can then start reaching out to the women. And what was so interesting was, on our side of the fence before 40 Days for Life started, there was a lot of different approaches. There were a lot of different things going on. So there was a gentleman who would, stake, something in the ground and raise the American flag as if to say, I can't believe this is legal in our country. We had a gentleman that would dress up as the Grim Reaper and pace up and down the sidewalk, trying to remind people of the serious decision that they were getting ready to make. We had a woman, with, I think it was 30 times life-size picture of, an aborted child out on the public right-of-way. And again, I'm not at this moment commenting on the efficacy of any one of those approaches, but, collectively looking back, we didn't really have a cohesive strategy. It kind of looked like, a circus on our side of the fence. And so, I was noticing as a prayer volunteer, a sidewalk counselor, that women really weren't coming to the fence to talk. And I just remembered being so troubled by that, Kristan. I would look at the fence and feel like that fence was the Grand Canyon. And I would pray so many mornings, like, how do we reach these women? Like, how do we really meet them where they're at and let them know that they have help and options? You know, a woman at that Planned Parenthood would get out of her car and escorts would surround the car and try to distract them so they couldn't talk to us about the options that she had. And so I remember praying for a while, like, Lord, I will do whatever you want for me to reach these women, whatever that means, right? As long as it's peaceful, as long as it's, you know, within Christ-like values. And so at one point, out of that frustration, the collective frustration that we had in the community, it was my friend David B. Wright, my classmate Sean Carney, his wife Mary Lisa, another volunteer, that had a prayer around an old wooden table in the Coalition for Life office. And they said, God, we don't know how to end abortion in our community, but you do. You know, they were getting the numbers back from the county health department and not really seeing a dent every year. And so what was beautiful was God put on their heart this idea of 40 Days for Life. And it was, 40-day constant prayer vigil. And they thought, if we, knowing that 40 days has been used throughout biblical history to bring about a transformation in people, like, okay, if we do this in front of our local Planned Parenthood, would we see change? So they went to everybody in the community and they said, let's change the atmosphere out here. And so the atmosphere became what I call more peaceful, prayerful, and purposeful. And the beautiful thing was women started coming to the fence to talk. And I just remembered thinking, oh my gosh, like, this is so great. This is a game changer. If you're a science nerd and you did a split A/B test, like, okay, let's try this and then let's try this, right? And so I just remembered that having, a profound effect on me. I got to experience the very first 40 Days for Life campaign as a student. And so, what it did is it created an atmosphere where women felt safe coming to the fence to talk, because we were just regular people praying. And in that silence, she really had the power to reconsider her decision. And so anyways, after that, I thought, well, I'm going to go to law school. That's where I'm headed. And I went to law school, fully believing after I graduated that I was going to still be legal counsel. And I graduated at the height of the financial crisis when Obama was in office. It was really tough to find a job. And, I was leading on the side the Dallas 40 Days for Life campaign. We had that campaign, 4,000 people that came out to pray on the public right of way. And my friend David B. Wright called me and said, Lauren, that's the largest vigil in the world. And I don't know what's going on in Dallas. Appreciate your leadership. What about joining the 40 Days for Life national team? And so for over 2 years, I advised the campaign spiritually, strategically, got the first blush at things legally. And I'll tell you, though, before accepting that job, I had a moment where I was like, oh, my gosh, this is going to change the direction of my career and my life. It's not going to look good on a resume if I go work for 40 Days for Life. But I realized that this was an opportunity to save lives and impact eternal souls. And so I eventually said yes to that. Worked for them for over 2 years, learned so much on the community level about ending abortion and reaching women in crisis. And of course, all the miracles that have come from the 40 Days for Life national movement, international movement now, right? As it began to spread across the country after that time in College Station. When I was with them, I saw a need for a streamlined sidewalk counseling program. And just like 40 Days for Life had taught people how to build vigils and sustain that for 40 days, it's a lot of times 24/7. I thought, could we do this with sidewalk counseling? And so David at one point said, if you feel called to do this, my call is to stay here and make the vigil as strong as possible. You got to do this aside from us. And so I just took that leap of faith again and said, let's do this on the community level. Let's provide comprehensive training tools and full-time staff support for people. So that's the story, Kristan, is that, it was just an invitation to pray. It was an invitation to reach women. And then when I saw that transformation about how powerful it can be, when you kind of know what you're doing and just get a few tips and strategies under your belt to affect change, to save lives, I was hooked, and I just, I couldn't get away from it. So
that's how everyone working at Students for Life, I think, feels. They get hooked and they can't get away.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Because you I think sometimes people come in working in the pro-life movement and say, I'm going to do this for a couple years, serve here. And then you see that you can have this tremendous impact just you, one person, can save these lives, can transform all of these people's views on abortion that will end up saving lives. And I think you get hooked on that of like, why else would I do anything else? Like, I can't just go make widgets. Like that would be such an unfulfilling life if I was just making widgets or just making money. I think that's what you said is how so many folks get into the pro-life movement and serve full time. And I love how you saw this need and then you set out to fill the need. What was some of the things that you were seeing that precipitated the need for Sidewalk Advocates for Life? You said there wasn't a cohesive strategy. What do you think was the challenge in the sidewalk? Because as Sidewalk Advocates, there have been sidewalk counselors for decades. But what was the challenges you saw that you thought we should step in, someone should really grow this?
Yeah. So when I was working for 40 Days for Life National and got that front row seat to seeing what was going on in the community level, what we noticed was that some people were finding some good sidewalk training, but then they were fizzling out because they didn't have infrastructure or support behind them, right? So you have moms and dads, some of us in the pro-life movement have 7 kids, or we're running a business, we're so busy, right? But they want to answer this call. And so the thought was, what if we had a ready-made program that could go to work for them, that we had, comprehensive research-based training, that we had ready-made tools, bulletin announcements, flyer templates, literature options at their fingertips. They didn't have to do all the research on that. And then full-time staff support, because, for those in your audience who are believers, we believe that this is a spiritual battle and it's not easy all of the time. At the very least, it can be at moments a difficult activity, especially when, you get rejected at times and you're a little bit discouraged. And so we wanted to go to bat for these saints on the front lines. We wanted to come in and let them know that they weren't alone, just as we tell the women that you're not alone, right? You're not alone in answering this call, and we're going to be there with you every step of the way until your abortion facility shuts down.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so neat. I mean, that's similar to what we've done with Students for Life, to say you're not alone. And we're going to have this ready-made system for you that's going to allow you to be more effective, reach more people, that you don't have to spend your time and spin your wheels trying to figure out how to make a constitution or figuring out how to organize this certain type of event. So that's I love that. All right, so let's get into some of the difficult conversations that you've had or that that have been had out in front of the abortion facility, and maybe get into a little bit how you feel that we should do a better job of answering these questions, answering these concerns that these women who really feel like they have no other option than to be there.
Yeah, so I think the most difficult moments for me on the sidewalk have been when she almost chose life. Like I said earlier, that fence for me really was an allegory to the apparent division in this battle, and really just that desperation of wanting to meet a woman in crisis where she's at and let her know that she just has help, that she has other options. One story that comes to mind is when I was sidewalk counseling with the Dallas Diocese one morning. I had done a lot of sidewalk counseling throughout my college career. I learned the Monsignor Riley method, the Karen Black method. So when I was out on the sidewalk in Dallas, there was a woman who, when I reached out to her, I'll call her Sarah. When I reached out to Sarah, I let her know, hey, sweetie, we've got real help for you next door. Our pregnancy center has, anything that you can need. We're there for you. You're not alone. Just letting her know that we care, that we've got options. And it was so interesting because immediately when I started talking to her, tears sprang to her eyes and she kept looking over at her boyfriend. And I was like, oh boy, I think boyfriend is running the show. And we see that a lot at the abortion facility, that women are making these decisions because no one is standing with them. And, I had my partner talking to, it was a gentleman I was with. So he was talking to the boyfriend and I was talking to her, and she just kept looking at me, tears now streaming down her face. And she's like, I don't know. I just don't know if I can do this. And I kept telling her, you're not alone, whatever it is, like, we're here for you. Right. It was just such a quick exchange. I couldn't even get to the crux of why she was there. And at one point, with tears streaming down her face, she looks at me and she says, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And she runs into the abortion facility. I mean, this was a woman that wasn't empowered. She didn't feel like she had a choice. She felt like quite apparently she had no choice because of what her partner probably had said to her just before they arrived. And so I remembered, so there had already been 3 turnarounds that morning. I had witnessed 3 babies saved. And so this was the morning of the March for Life 2011 in Dallas. And I went to the March for Life bawling my eyes out because Sarah was right there. She was right there, and it's tempting sometimes to take it personal. But what I found as I've grown in this ministry over the years is that, if we do everything right, people still make decisions. I teach this across the country and I still get rejected now and then. Now we're seeing more turnarounds than we've ever seen in the history of sidewalk counseling today. There's a lot that we've learned, but you can do your part and someone can still reject that, And so there really is a peace when you walk away today from the abortion facility, at least for me, and knowing that I did everything I could and God isn't done with her yet. I mean, I'm sidewalk counseling with women who have had 4 and 7 abortion facilities in their past. And that's what's so amazing is like, we don't know the rest of the story. And we believe from a faith perspective, God is still pursuing them. The other one that I'll mention is this took place just a couple years ago. I was out on the sidewalk in Louisville, Kentucky, the last remaining abortion facility in the state, of course. They probably have the best abortion facility escorts in the country. And I remember one of those mornings, there was a father who was sitting on the sidewalk. And it was interesting. He was surrounded by sidewalk counselors, but people were they weren't really getting on his level. They weren't really meeting him where he was at, even though I appreciate their prayers and their presence there, of course. So I was like, I got down, I knelt down and I was like, hi, I'm Lauren. We've got our pregnancy center next door. Can you tell me what's going on? And just trying to invite him into conversation. And, he talked back to me. And at one point he said, is everything, all of the help that you're describing, is that true? Is that really true? And I said, as sure as I sit here today, absolutely. And if that pregnancy center doesn't have what you need, I will personally fill it for you. I guarantee that whatever you and your girlfriend need this morning, we're there for you. And I empowered him to go back in there. So he said, let me go to the pregnancy center. It's the only time in like over 20 years on the sidewalk that I actually walked a father over to the pregnancy center first. He went in there. He saw how wonderful the pregnancy center was, how legitimate it was, how they were ready to serve him and his girlfriend at a moment's notice. He went back in there empowered to try to change her mind. About 10 to 15 minutes later, he came out the doors and he couldn't even look at me. And I walked down the sidewalk for a little bit. I wanted to give him some space, but I also wanted to say, hey, I'm here. Like, tell me what's going on. How are you doing? And he went into his car in that paid parking lot where they had arrived that morning. And he grabbed a golf club and he went to a tree and began to beat the side of the tree because he was so frustrated that he couldn't save his child. He was absolutely heartbroken. I get chills, recounting the story right now. And I said, hey, buddy, I'm going to give you some space, right? Because I didn't really want to die by blunt force trauma in Louisville, Kentucky, in case he was, all the emotions were going everywhere. We found out his girlfriend was taking the first abortion pill at that time. And we were able to get abortion pill reversal information in his hands. And I still don't know to this day what happened to them. But what I'm at peace with is that we did our part. And this father felt so well served by us. We had prayed with him. We had served him well. Again, I watched them leave the abortion facility. He couldn't even look at me because I represented for him what he couldn't make happen. And I just called out to him and said, hey, we love you. Call abortion pill reversal. Mm-hmm. And so, those are the moments on the sidewalk where you see these fathers bawling their eyes out that they can't do anything to save their children, where there's a woman who's not empowered, who feels trapped and feels like she has no other option and she's running in there. Those are tough. If you have any sort of a heart, those are tough moments because you know what's at stake. But again, as someone who is a believer myself, I go back to the fact that God isn't done with their story yet, and he will continue to pursue them no matter, what happens at the abortion facility. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so terrible. We've had calls like that into our office before of men just utterly desperate to save the life of their child. And, what can I do? Who can I call? And there is no legal recourse for these men at all. There's not.
Because of Roe. That's right.
Yeah, because of Roe. Roe basically silenced the role of fathers. Yeah. And so that's something we're dealing with. So I guess I think folks who are listening and tuning into this podcast episode, I think what they would probably want to take away from this, and I know I definitely want to take away, is what are your best tips? If we're in a conversation with a friend or family member who's considering abortion, or maybe it's on social media, what is in your, I mean, you are probably one of the most foremost experts in trying to get folks, women who are determined to have an abortion, to change their mind. What is the best way to have that conversation? And what do we say?
Yeah, that's great. The most important thing you can remember at an abortion facility is that the baby isn't the one making the decision, it's the mother. So she's the one that you have to reach. If we don't reach her heart, abortion doesn't end in that moment. So we really try to remember that everything that we're doing out there, the way we dress, the material that we give her, the way we speak to her, recognizes that we've got to start with her first. And this isn't instinctual for us as pro-lifers. You know, a lot of us get into this because we want to desperately save the life of the baby. And that's a great motivation. The best way to put it is, you know, famous Sidewalk counselor Karen Black says that we as pro-lifers have things in the right order. God comes first. A mother puts her children before herself. So it's really God, baby, mom. But a woman in crisis mode, a woman in self-preservation mode that, you know, is seeing present self with future self and doesn't know how to reconcile that, is seeing her whole life go up in smoke, doesn't know how she's going to put food on the table, or maybe even where she's going to live when mom and dad kick her out of the house. Again, those aren't good reasons to take the life of a child, but that's the mode that she's in. We have to, if we want to reach her, and sometimes the very small amount of time that we have to invert our thinking. And this doesn't mean leaving behind what we know to be true about life. What this means is using language and an approach that she can understand. So we're going to invert our thinking and start with mom first. So we can say things like, we care about you, we love you, we've got real help for you today. Again, guys, if it's not natural for you to tell a woman you just met that you love her, great, like personalize it to your own personality, right? So it's just starting with, you know, hi there, I'm Lauren. We've got real help for you next door. You know, I like to very quickly, especially now where we're kind of confined to a driveway. You know, sometimes when you research public right of way with, you know, the cars pulling in, you don't have great fence access. So you're at a driveway. You know, we're teaching people very quickly to get out free pregnancy tests, free sonogram, free options counseling, letting them know how much money they're going to save by going with the pregnancy center over the abortion facility today, because they're going to charge her sometimes up to $275 just for, you know, the initial blood work and the ultrasound and all of that. And these women, a lot of them are coming there because of a financial strain. So we are truly serving them by letting them know the financial, you know, backing that we have through our pregnancy centers. And then, you know, it's seeing if she's ready to turn around right there and then. Some women will turn around within 15 seconds. They want a pregnancy test. Maybe they took a home pregnancy test and it was positive. They want to confirm it. They're trying to figure out what to do. And we know if we can just get her through the doors of the pregnancy center, and she sees a life-saving sonogram, 90% of them, up to 90% of them are going to choose life. So we see turnaround sometimes in 15, 30 seconds at a driveway today, which is so powerful. Now, if that doesn't happen, if she's like, well, I'm thinking about it, I have an appointment, then we move to the next step, which is ask and listen, right? So we've pretty much had, you know, introducing ourselves, letting her know help that's available. So we got a 5-point method, right? And the third one is ask and listen. So we can say, you know, what is it that brings you here today? Is it finances? Is it family, sweetie? What can we help you with? And a lot of times she will tell you what's going on. Sometimes it's just a general thing, and we can talk about the general issue of abortion that, you know, we understand she's here because of, you know, a crisis moment. We can empathize with that. That's so important because she may be in a world of hurt and she's not able to think clearly, right? When you're in crisis mode, when you're in self-preservation mode, you can't always think clearly. And then, you know, speaking to that need. So step 4 is to solve the problem. Hey, we've got a maternity home. Hey, we've got, you know, financial backing through our center over here. We can help you with rent and groceries, a place to live. And then step 5 is empower her to leave. And so letting her know that, like, you know, at any point in the conversation, we can say when she's ready to go, like we can say, can we get you next door to our pregnancy center? Or even if she's, you know, initially on the fence, just saying, will you give us a try, right? Will you just see what our center has to say? They've served so many women this year. They're so amazing. Betty's on duty right now. You're painting this picture of how she can go from the abortion facility to this wonderful, amazing center that has all of these free services. And that's how we see Sidewalk Advocates and Sidewalk Advocates for Life. We're the gateway to these life-affirming resources, right? So that's probably my best tip, is start with mom and serve her first. Now, you remembered in the whole thing, mom, baby, God. A lot of times when we do this 5-point method, we fill mom's needs. Mom turns around. Most of the time when she turns around, it's just, we've just gotten to mom. We haven't even really talked about baby, right? Because when her needs are filled, when that crisis is taken care of, her instinct is to become more maternal and reconsider the life of her child. But as the conversation develops, when you're meeting that need, when you're solving the problem that brought her there, it is good. Of course, it's super important, right? If you can get to this, but like I said, a lot of them turn around right then and there on mom. Then we say, how far along are you? And she says, I'm 8 weeks. And then you can paint a picture of life for her, something the abortion facility won't do. And then, do you have a faith? Do you pray? Then maybe planting a seed for faith, if that's important to you, which it is to us. But again, a lot of times those really heavy conversations tend to take, they do better in the pregnancy center, away from the natural tension of the sidewalk. So once again, I just want to emphasize, when she's ready to go, when her needs are filled, and again, that natural law that's written on her heart that has her reconsider the life of her child, get her to the pregnancy center. Your job is done, right? That's what we need to do. And when she walks through the doors of the pregnancy center, it's a game changer. I saw a statistic the other day that it's 95% of pregnancy-related services for women choose abortion at Planned Parenthood, right? That's a really high number. That's a really high number. But when we get her to the doors of the pregnancy center on her own, when she's presented with facts about her baby, resources to address her situation, that number almost completely flips, Kristan. And that's amazing.
That's awesome. I think that's something for us, though, as pro-lifers, what you're saying of asking her what that crisis, what that need is. I think we have to know in the community, what are the resources that are out there, and to be able to answer those questions. When you guys go into a community with Sidewalk Advocates, do you all have a meeting with the pregnancy center and figure out where are the gaps? What are the resources that are currently being provided? Where's another place that can meet this need? Is that something you guys have to focus on now?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that we train Sidewalk Advocates, volunteers with our organization, to know the heck out of their local and national resources, right? Because there is a solution for what she's dealing with. We see ourselves as a team for life with our local pregnancy resource center. So we're doing crisis intervention, and they are experts in ongoing crisis management. And so again, we're the gateway to those life-affirming resources. What is so beautiful is that I think for the longest time, sidewalk counselors were kind of over here and pregnancy centers were over here.
That's what I was going to get to. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And what we're seeing, at least in our organization, is that there's a ton of pregnancy centers now that are approaching us and want to add a sidewalk component under their banner, because they see the difference that it makes. So for example, our team in Jackson, Mississippi, when they added sidewalk advocacy under their banner, so they started sending, certain people out to the sidewalk to reach out to women. They're at the front door of the abortion facility. Their traffic increased 5 times. That is absolutely stunning. And we're getting ready to do a huge outreach to pregnancy centers and letting them know, this is working, I think the other thing too is pregnancy centers, they've been a little bit ahead of the game in understanding that you're reaching women. We're not counseling the baby. We have to convince a mother. We have to encourage a mother, right? for the longest time, they've adhered to a certain set of values that best reaches that mother in crisis. And maybe they've seen sidewalk counseling as they've mixed it up with protest, or, it's been misunderstood for a long time. But sidewalk counseling has also developed over the years. And I'm proud that we're part of that. When we go to them with our pledge of integrity that says all of our volunteers have to be peaceful, prayerful, loving, and law abiding, they say those are our values too. And then they're more apt to partner with us, which is so exciting. So we're seeing a springtime on the sidewalk, a beautiful coordination now between sidewalk counselors and pregnancy centers.
That's so needed, because I remember when we first started Students for Life, and I go into community and meet with the pregnancy center and tell them what we're doing on campus. And I'd say, well, are you talking to the people on the sidewalk? No, we don't. And I remember one community in Colorado, the pregnancy center purposely closed down on the day abortions were being committed, because they were so afraid that the sidewalk counselors would be associated with their organization. I was like, that's like your day. I mean, this is why you exist. So that's amazing to hear. And I love that statistic, because I think that's something you guys can obviously take to other pregnancy centers to say, look, this is why you exist. And I know so many centers, just from speaking with them and banquets, I mean, that they're struggling with getting abortion-minded women into the door. They're getting women who need help, but they're not truly getting those who are determined or thinking they're going to have an abortion into the door, which is why their donors give to them.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like this disconnect that's been developing. And so we need to do a better job there. How do you, speaking of having hard conversations, how do you deal with the pro-lifers who have a different approach and strategy, and who may be 2 decades older than you, and that are out there doing something that you really have concerns about in terms of scaring women to run into the abortion facility? I know this came up the other day. I was mentoring one of our student leaders who is trying to bring together her local community. And there's a huge disconnect there, because there's Sidewalk Advocates, and then there's people who do other things, and trying to get everyone to work together. How do you bridge that gap? Because I think anybody in the pro-life movement is going to have, if you're in the pro-life movement, you're going to have these difficult conversations at some point.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Because we have robust First Amendment rights, thank God for that in our country, you will sometimes see different approaches out on the sidewalk. What I want everyone to know is largely it's very peaceful out there, but sometimes it is that circus that we used to see in College Station. And I've been to sites like that even.
And you don't see it very often anymore. It's
changed a lot. I think so many people, when you just bring up the idea of sidewalk advocacy, sidewalk counseling, they're like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to get arrested? Am I going to have to do all these things? And it's like, no, go out there. It's actually pretty peaceful. It's actually pretty calm. And that's what is such a blessing today. Sometimes there is a need to distinguish ourselves from people who don't share our values. And so what we do is 2 things. One is that definitely pray for them, and even encourage them maybe to come to a Sidewalk Advocates for Life training and just see if maybe they might be interested in doing something different. To give you a really great concrete example of this, we had a gentleman in Pensacola, Florida, who had been doing things a certain way for a number of years. And he was approached by our local leaders, Ernie and his wife, Marianne, and said, hey, do you want to attend this new training? And he said, yeah, why not? I'll give it a shot, right? So he went to the training, and he was like, oh my gosh, I see the case that's being made, and starting with mom and being loving and peaceful and prayerful, and then moving to baby and planting seeds for faith. Again, thinking like she is, right? So she's in a place to best receive it. Again, God's always at the top, but we want to reach these women, and we ultimately want to bring them to Christ. That was the cry of his heart. And that's why he struggled with, it was kind of a misfire. He wanted so bad to bring them to Christ. He wanted so bad to, reach the workers, right? That he was just kind of misfiring, and he was not seeing fruit from it, which is huge. So anyways, he changed what he was doing, and he ended up bonding with an abortion facility worker at that facility. And that was actually the first recorded worker who left the business. They bonded so much that he even made her a birthday cake. And she left on a Friday. It was her last day on a Friday. And I could just cry telling this story. It's so beautiful. But she came out and she hugged every sidewalk advocate and every prayer volunteer there. And she stood back and looked at the group and she said, "Don't stop doing what you're doing. Women are changing their minds." And this was a site that had actually recorded a good number of turnarounds, a good number of babies saved. And from that statement, they were like, wow, there's so many more than we even know, and she left and is now pursuing her faith. So beautiful. Sometimes people aren't willing to change, right? This is just the story of human beings. They like what they're doing, or maybe they saw a couple of turnarounds one year and they can't get their mind around the idea that maybe some things have changed and we're seeing a lot more fruit. And there's a struggle there because it might even be, and I had to go through this as I evolved as a sidewalk advocate, as a sidewalk counselor. I had to realize that some things I was doing in the beginning weren't effective. And there's a reckoning with that because you're like, man, did I lose somebody or could I have done something better? And ultimately, we can't place that burden on ourselves. But so there's some cases where we have to, coach our sidewalk advocates to, visually, verbally, and physically distinguish themselves. And what I mean by that is like, you might have to dress all in the same color that morning. So she knows immediately, okay, the peaceful people are in light blue. The peaceful people are in hot pink, right? So maybe you throw on a reflector vest. Maybe you all wear the same color t-shirt, right? So then when you make contact with a woman, and this goes to distinguishing yourself verbally, you can say to her, "Hey there, sweetie, by the way, I'm Lauren. I'm with a peaceful group in light blue this morning. You can come talk to us at any time," right? So she knows right away, okay, these are the safe people while the other people are yelling her head off. Sometimes we do see that. And then you just do your best to physically stand apart from them on the sidewalk. One of the most powerful things that I've ever heard Abby Johnson say, it was a great admonishment to all of us, is that when someone looks out the window and they work in the abortion industry, when a woman is inside in the waiting room and she looks out that window and she sees, people out on the sidewalk doing a whole host of things, she can't always readily distinguish who's with who, right? They just see us all as kind of one big group. And that's why it's important to take some of these steps so that people know who you are and what you're about. Now, that all being said, I do want to mention that, by God's grace, Sidewalk Advocates for Life is sitting today where it is. And in humility, we still continue to learn from other great pro-lifers. And there are times, we're not doing the same exact thing that we were doing on the sidewalk 6.5 years ago as we're doing today. And I'm so grateful for so many saints on the front lines that, came alongside us and said, try this, or let's do this. Or we look in our local communities and say, oh my gosh, what's going on in borderland Texas, New Mexico? What's going on in St. Louis? Like, how can we bring that into, our national system and help people to see more miracles? And so we're always constantly having this conversation of improvement, because at the end of the day, it's not what we think is most effective. It's what actually reaches her and helps her to turn around.
Yeah, that's so important of not being married to your tactics, right? You're married to your mission and your vision of what you're trying to achieve, but the tactics will change. In fact, I know with working with students, our messaging, our tactics have to continue to change as the generation changes. And, it's not the same. I get older every year and they always stay the same age, but they're further and further apart from where I am and where my generation was when I was in college. And I think that's important that we continue to challenge ourselves to say, this is our mission, is to save the most lives. How are we going to be the most effective at doing that? So what are your tips, I guess, for people who are having conversations with abortion-minded women? Is it pretty much the same when you're online, when you're in a Instagram chat? Is it just asking her what her needs are and trying to fill those needs?
Yeah. And one of the things that I may not have made clear in the beginning is like, the mom baby God is like our compass. And the 5-point method is like our map, right? When I rattled that off. When you feel like you're lost in a conversation, whether you're online, I had a conversation with a woman at Walgreens the other day who grabbed Plan B, and I just offered her other options. I can't turn it off completely, right? Or whether you're out on the sidewalk, Start with her. It's about caring for her. I mean, this really at its core is loving people, is filling their needs, is letting them know they have other options, is listening and empathizing with them. And then, by the way, how far along are you? Painting that picture of life and then planting seeds of faith. We've got Sidewalk Advocates that in their, are actually going into certain chat rooms. There's a lot of women on Baby Center that are trying to decide what to do about their pregnancy. You are a Sidewalk Advocate online or in person, right? And you start with mom. And again, it's just, hey there, this is who I am. You have a life affirming pregnancy center 1 mile from you. We tell people when they're doing stuff online to make sure you have, for example, option line at your fingertips, because you may be talking to someone way across the United States. You don't know what the resources are in the backyard, but you can go to optionline.org, enter her zip code, enter her city, and you can get a whole list of the life affirming pregnancy centers that are there. You mentioned something else, Kristan, that was interesting. You talked about how an abortion facility was closed right when the pregnancy center was closed right when the abortion facility was open. And sometimes, we've got to do a little bit more work on our end. So if we're connecting her to a pregnancy center that we've never been to, we might actually make a phone call first and make sure someone's in the office. This is her availability. We might kind of go above and beyond to make sure that handoff is strong, because at any point in this process, she could get overwhelmed, and Planned Parenthood is there with their $1 million of marketing and advertising, and it's all over the place. If you're facing an unexpected pregnancy, come in here for non-judgmental help. If you got a friend that comes alongside her, even online, it can really change the game. Yeah.
That's awesome. What do you see as the need, coming into 2021, what are the things that that we need to do better in the movement on? Is there the different messaging that needs to be developed for abortion risks, more scientific literature created that the women feel like it's coming from a non-biased scientific source? What do you think are some of our needs?
Yeah, that is a great question. It's a question that I'm constantly asking myself. I just have to give, a huge shout out to Students for Life. I think you guys are on the cusp here of helping people understand, again, that we're trying to reach a woman who's in crisis, that to be pro-life is to be pro-woman. And I'm seeing us do a better job of that. Mm-hmm. I think it's 1 in 4 women in this country have experienced abortion, approximately, right? And we're dealing with a very wounded culture. And that's why a lot of the times, even when I'm not standing in front of an abortion facility, but I'm just having a conversation with someone in person, I keep in mind that they may have 1 or multiple abortions in their past. I don't shy away from what is right and true, but I do tailor my approach so that I can best reach that woman. And for me as a believer, it is ultimately getting her to Jesus Christ. I want everybody to hear that, right? Mm-hmm. But if we know from the research that she gets there in a more solid way by starting with her and talking about how we care about these women, how they're not alone, how we have resources and options for them, all of a sudden the pro-life movement just takes on kind of a whole different, understanding. To just share another example, I was standing in front of the Washington, D.C. mega facility that just went up a few years ago. And there was a girl walking by. And, just because we were standing there, she was like, oh, by the way, can I come in and get my STD testing tomorrow? She thought we were abortion center escorts. And I had to tell her, actually, we're not with the facility. And she said, well, what are you out here doing? And I explained it to her. And this was a woman who was a teacher in, an inner city community. And she was like, I just see so much destruction. These women are getting pregnant. They don't have options. They don't have family behind them, all of this. And I told her about everything we do for women, how she knew that we cared about the baby, right? But I told her about how we serve women so well. And at the very end, she started to cry and she said, I'm going to think about what you said, because I used to hate the pro-life movement and I don't hate you. Maybe I am pro-life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think so much. And again, Kristan, you know me, I'm out on Facebook. I'm talking a lot about abortion on the cultural level. When we're having that left brain discussion, I'm zealous about what truth is and all of that. But I try to temper that with the idea that a lot of times people are coming from a right brain emotional perspective. Right. because they have experienced abortion. If we're going to win this battle, resoundingly. We have to keep that in mind, that a lot of people are walking around wounded, and we want them to get the message that there is hope and healing and freedom after abortion.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's totally right. And that's why you don't see me out in the sidewalks, because I'm such a left brain speaker and thinker that it's very hard for me to get into my right brain. That's why our team is much better. I feel that our team is much better at changing minds than I am. And I know I'll never be that. I've gotten better, but I'm still not. It's great. Yeah. I'm much better doing numbers and rallying the troops to get activated. But it's funny because God has a use for all of us. But sure. One of the things you were talking about, and I was thinking when I asked you that question about what does the movement need, I was also asking myself that, because I'm always asking that. We did a research study last year, and it was pretty comprehensive, and we did 50 one-on-one interviews, so 90 minutes to 2 hours, and asked women, mushy middle, 18, 29-year-olds, how they felt about abortion, how they felt about the pro-life movement. But it's so interesting that all of them had a negative view of the pro-life movement. Yeah. And when we asked them, and it wasn't me because I was behind the screen, like freaking out, because they couldn't hear me, but like, just say this. But the interviewer would ask her, well, what was the first time you ever interacted with the life movement? What was the first time you ever saw somebody who was anti-abortion? And every single time it was, well, I saw somebody on the street in front of an abortion facility with a sign, with a bloody sign. Yeah. And so it's so significant to see that it's changed, and our approach out on the sidewalks has changed, but it hasn't changed enough to the point where it's changed how people view us. And that view is really what limits people from joining us. I mean, I remember listening to some of these interviews we did, and I'm like sitting there going, that person's pro-life. Like, she's like saying she's against abortion, but she wouldn't call herself pro-life because she didn't want to associate herself with who we are, of what she thinks pro-lifers are. So I think for us as pro-lifers, I think we have to be thinking about that when we're out on campuses or when we're out in the community. Not only are you witnessing there to that woman, but the cars driving by. Everyone who sees you is going to, and if this is the first time they've ever seen anybody like that, forever, you're going to be what they envision a pro-lifer is.
Yeah, absolutely. My friend David B. Wright would always say that we're creating the constructive tension needed for abortion to end. And in order for that to be productive, we can't be doing anything that drives people away. We want to do stuff that drives people into conversation with us, that's inviting. We want people to know they're safe. That girl that walked by me on the streets in Washington, D.C., like, I wanted her to know she had a safe place to explore her feelings with me. And the other thing I want to mention too, and again, not to go completely down this road, but just so people have an understanding, we in Sidewalk Advocates for Life believe abortion victim photos have their role in the movement. I like them best in an educational setting where there's a chance for dialogue, where people really have a chance to work out their feelings. But out on the sidewalk, what we have found is that's not drawing people into conversation with us. And again, what the research shows is that when women are presented with that image, there's something called cognitive dissonance that happens, right? Remember that we're starting with mom first. So if we run to baby in any way, sometimes initially, her tendency is to shut down and say, well, you don't understand me. You don't understand my story, right? But when we start with her, then her heart is more open to hearing about babies, more open to hearing about God. So I've just found through the years, as someone who used to stand next to someone in College Station, right, with 30 times life-size poster of an aborted child, and then saw the difference when we kind of put that away and just reached out one-on-one with people, I noticed a huge difference. And I think that's just the case we're making to folks.
That's awesome. This has been certainly informative for me, and I'm hoping that everyone listening to this conversation picked up a couple of tips that they can use when you're having conversations. And certainly if you're in the pro-life movement, you're going to be having conversations with women, with family members who are in a crisis pregnancy situation. Lauren, where does everyone go to get more involved with Sidewalk Advocates, maybe sign up, attend a training? Where can they go and follow like all the latest news too?
Sure. So we've got 202 locations around the globe, of course, mostly here in the United States and growing by God's grace. So there might actually be a Sidewalk Advocates for Life location near you. So you can go to sidewalkadvocates.org, click on our locations tab, and see if indeed your local abortion facility is being covered by peaceful, prayerful, loving, wonderful people, right? But there may not be a program in your community. And if you're somebody that would really be blessed by ready-made, comprehensive training tools and full-time staff support, we would love to serve you. So you can also go to sidewalkadvocates.org and click the apply button in the upper right-hand corner. We periodically open applications throughout the year just so we can process those at the right time and serve everyone to the best of our ability. But right now our applications are open through December the 31st. And so it's a great time to kind of get in the game. And if you want to talk to somebody about your abortion facility, one of the most exciting things for me that I think we're doing well is looking at a site strategically and seeing at every point where we can reach out to clients. A lot of people haven't researched their public right away, haven't thought strategically. I love doing that. I love beating the abortion facility at their own game, right? They flip out when pro-lifers get organized and they have people here and there and all that. They don't know what to do with that, So sometimes we're getting on the phone with people who say, sidewalk advocacy, sidewalk counseling here is impossible. Like there's no way I can reach out to clients. And we're like, is your driveway on public right of way? Are you wearing something where you stand out from the road? Are you smiling and waving? It's constitutionally permissible for you to invite a car to stop for 15, 30 seconds in the driveway. Now there's even case law that says it can be a lot longer, even if somebody pulls up behind them. So these are the things that we love to research, and we just love giving people hope.
That's awesome. That's so great. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your tips. I hope everyone gets connected with you and look up to see if there's a Sidewalk Advocates location in your community so you can go and become a Sidewalk Advocate yourself and get trained. Or maybe you start to lead one. I know Students for Life, we do periodic Sidewalk Advocate trainings for our leaders and fellows throughout the year, so you can definitely get plugged in there. But thanks, Lauren, for all that you do. And thank you all for tuning in this week. And come back next week for another difficult conversation. Bye, guys.